There's underrated, and then there's Louis Tomlinson, one of the most overlooked musicians of the past decade. So I think it's about time that we talk about him.
Look at that scarf, lad.
Louis William Tomlinson, who is interestingly enough born Louis Troy Austin, was born on Christmas Eve 1991 in Doncaster, South Yorkshire. His parents were 18 when they had him, with his father Troy Austin leaving him when he was only an infant. Years down the line, he legally took up the surname of his stepfather Mark Tomlinson, and I'm sure you can understand why. But anyways, growing up, Louis was raised with 4 younger half-sisters and 3 more siblings later down the line. So with all this in mind, it was pretty obvious that Louis grew up with a very unique family life. So it wasn't that big a shock that he was a bit of a hooligan growing up. After failing his first year of A-levels at Hayfield, he ended up going to Hallcross School, where he appeared in several musical productions, which gave him a growing sense of ambition that eventually led him to land the lead role in his school's production of Grease. Landing the role was a big motivator, which along with the fact that he was kicked out of a band that he was in, led him to audition for the X Factor.
Look at that scarf, lad.
People forget that Louis auditioned for the X Factor a year earlier than the rest of the 1D lads back in 2009, but failed to make it past the producer's audition, which motivated him to try again the following year. That time around, Louis made it onto the main stage where he sang Elvis Is Not Dead, but let's just say good old Simon Cowell wasn't too keen on it, as he asked Louis to sing another, which eventually became Hey There Delilah. And awesome enough, this time around, he got 3 yeses from the judges, sending him right to boot camp. Although he failed to progress to the end of the boys category of the boot camp, after a suggestion from guest judge Nicole Scherzinger, he and 4 other guys were put in a band that eventually became One Direction. They may not have won the show, but by the end they were already pop stars, and within years were doing stadium tours all across the globe as arguably the most popular act in all of music. But I'm sure you know all this stuff, so let's just fast forward a bit. And after the group took a quote-unquote hiatus in 2015, Louis quickly began carving out a new path for himself, even appearing on the X Factor that year to help his former boss Simon Cowell. Fast forward a bit more, and late that next year, Louis released his first solo song with DJ Steve Aoki called Just Hold On, which he dedicated to his late mother in a performance that he did on the X Factor.
Look at that scarf, lad.
The following summer, in July of 2017, Louis released his second collaboration with this time Baby Rexha and Digital Farm Animals with the song Back to You. A little bit after the release, Louis signed a deal with Epic Records, and then in October of that year, dropped a promotional single Just Like You, and then his second single Miss You that December. Unlike most of the other 1D boys, instead of releasing an album, in July 2018, Louis announced that he would judge that year the X Factor, and crazy enough ended up winning the show with the artist he picked, Dalton Harris. Fast forward a bit, and in February 2019, Louis announced that he had signed with the newly launched Arista Records, alongside the eventual release of the song Two of Us the following month. That August, he announced that his debut album would be coming out in early 2020, while also dropping the second single off the album, titled Kill My Mind. Over the course of the next few months, Louis released 3 more singles and announced a world tour for his debut album, Walls, which dropped on January 31st, 2020. Sadly for good old Louis, the tour had to be put on hold for the pandemic, but at the very least, he was still able to sell a digital concert called Live from London that sold a pretty impressive over 160,000 tickets, with the proceeds going to various charities, which, hey, by the way, is really cool. In May the following year, Louis switched labels to BMG for the release of his second album, which later became Faith in the Future and was released on August of 2022, and cool enough debuted at number 1 on the UK albums chart. Fast forward a bit more, and in August of the following year, Louis announced that a documentary called All of the Voices would be coming out in March, and a few months after the release, began on tour where he is currently doing his thing across North America.
Look at that scarf, lad.
So now that I've talked about his journey here, let's get into the real reason why I made this video in the first place. And it's because Louis is severely underrated. Outside of his initial collaborations with Steve Aoki and the BB/Digital Farm combo, his music has been consistently overlooked. Maybe the fact that his debut album was released nearly 5 years after the band went on hiatus, or maybe it's the style of music. But either way, Louis has not been given nearly the same amount of kudos as his former bandmates, even though he's extremely talented. Fans of One Direction know this all too well, and he seems like a very similar situation to what's currently happening with Niall Horan, although this one is much more prominent. I don't know if it's the label or what, but I haven't heard any of Louis' songs on the radio since he released Back to You in 2017, and I think that's a crying shame. If you agree with all this, drop a hashtag give Louis some love in the comments down below, because he sure as hell deserves it. Louis had a rocky childhood, never felt like he quite fit in One Direction, and now is flying way under the radar, which doesn't seem right to me. So let's change it.
Look at that scarf, lad.
Thanks for watching the video. Spread the word about how...
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.